Sophia Kensington stirred awake, her fingers brushing against the soft silk of her sheets. The morning sun filtered lazily through floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating her sprawling penthouse overlooking Manhattan. The city stretched before her like a living, breathing entity, its sounds muffled by the triple-paned glass that separated her from the chaos below. Yawning, she reached for her phone on the bedside table, and the screen immediately came alive with notifications. Messages from acquaintances in her social circle, reminders for exclusive spa appointments, and invitations to high-society events filled the screen. But Sophia simply stared at them with indifference before setting the device aside. Sliding out of bed, she walked barefoot across the heated marble floors of her room. Her walk-in closet stood before her like a shrine to wealth. Rows of designer shoes, racks of couture dresses, and shelves lined with handbags worth more than most people's yearly salaries. She ran her fingers absent-mindedly across the luxurious fabrics, but felt no spark of excitement. Sophia dressed herself in a crisp, white tailored blouse and slim black pants before heading downstairs, where Carmen, her housekeeper, was waiting with breakfast. The dining table was an extravagant display: freshly baked croissants, a platter of tropical fruits, and imported coffee steaming in a silver pot. "Miss Sophia," Carmen greeted, her voice warm. "Mr. Kensington called earlier this morning. He sends his regards and wanted to let you know he'll be out of town for the next few days." Sophia's smile faltered for the briefest moment before she smoothed it back into place. "Of course he is," she replied lightly, taking a seat at the table. The head chair, her father's chair, remained empty, just as it had been for years. Sophia stared at it while mechanically picking at a slice of papaya. Henry Kensington's absences had become a routine in Sophia's life. He was the business tycoon everyone admired but rarely saw, the man whose financial empire cast a long shadow over her life. She couldn't remember the last time he had been home for more than a few days. After finishing her breakfast, Sophia stepped into the waiting car. Her chauffeur, Ramon, greeted her with a polite nod. "Good morning, Miss Kensington. Where to today?" "Madison is waiting at the boutique," Sophia replied, her tone clipped. The car glided effortlessly through the bustling streets of Manhattan. Sophia gazed out the tinted windows, watching the world pass by. Pedestrians rushed along the sidewalks, couples laughed over coffee at outdoor cafes, and street vendors called out their wares. It was a world that felt alien to her, messy, vibrant, alive. Madison Carter, her closest friend, or so she thought, was already waiting when Sophia arrived at the upscale boutique. The two exchanged air kisses before diving into racks of designer clothes. "Sophia, you have to try this dress," Madison gushed, holding up a sleek black number. Sophia smiled faintly and took it, but her heart wasn't in it. As Madison prattled on about upcoming parties and vacation plans, Sophia felt a creeping sense of detachment. The conversations felt hollow, their laughter rehearsed. Later, as they sipped champagne in the boutique's private lounge, Madison's phone buzzed on the table. Sophia glanced at it out of habit, her eyes catching a message preview. "Everything's ready." "She won't suspect a thing." Sophia froze. Her mind reeled as she stared at the words. She quickly averted her gaze before Madison noticed. What could it mean? Sophia's instincts whispered that something was wrong. She excused herself, retreating to the restroom. Alone, she leaned against the marble sink, her reflection staring back at her from the mirror. For the first time, the perfectly polished image she had built for herself felt like a mask, fragile and suffocating. That evening, back in her penthouse, Sophia poured herself a glass of wine and sat by the window, gazing out at the twinkling lights of the city. Her father's absence, Madison's cryptic message, it all swirled together, leaving her feeling more isolated than ever. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from her father. "Sophia, I'll have to postpone our dinner again. Urgent business came up. I'll make it up to you soon." "Love?" Dad, Sophia set the phone down with a shaky exhale. She felt tears prick the corners of her eyes, but refused to let them fall. Her father's broken promises were nothing new. But tonight, the weight of it all felt unbearable. The empty penthouse, the fake friendships, the cold distance from her father, it all coalesced into a single, piercing thought. Is this what my life has come to? Sophia stood abruptly, her glass clinking against the marble table. She couldn't stay here, surrounded by meaningless luxury, pretending everything was fine. Her father's words from their last conversation echoed in her mind. "You need perspective, Sophia." A bitter laugh escaped her lips. Perspective? Was that his excuse for constantly pushing her aside? With a sudden surge of resolve, Sophia picked up her phone and called him. When he answered, she wasted no time. "Dad, we need to talk," she said firmly. "Sophia, I'm in the middle of—" "No," she interrupted. "You're always in the middle of something. I'm done with this, Dad. I need—" She paused, struggling to put her feelings into words. "I need something real." There was silence on the other end of the line. Then Henry spoke, his tone unusually calm. "Then it's time for you to leave Manhattan," he said. "Go to the vineyard." "The vineyard?" Sophia frowned. "What are you talking about?" "It's your mother's legacy," Henry replied. "You'll understand when you get there." Before Sophia could protest, the line went dead. She stared at the phone, her heart pounding. What was he thinking? Sending her to some vineyard in the middle of nowhere? But as she looked around the penthouse, at the glittering emptiness of her life, Sophia realized she had nothing to lose. With a deep breath, she made her decision. Tomorrow, she would leave Manhattan behind. The dusty, winding road stretched endlessly before Sophia as the car rattled along, every bump jostling her nerves. She leaned against the leather seat, arms crossed, staring out at the unfamiliar landscape. Gone were the skyscrapers and glittering lights of Manhattan. In their place were rolling hills, lush vineyards, and the open skies of Northern California. "How much longer?" she muttered, her tone clipped. "Not far now, Miss Kensington," Ramon replied from the driver's seat, his eyes briefly flicking to her in the rearview mirror. Sophia didn't respond. She tapped her manicured nails against the window, her frustration mounting. Her father's parting words echoed in her mind. "You'll understand when you get there." What did that even mean? She couldn't fathom how uprooting her from Manhattan to some remote vineyard was supposed to help her gain perspective. As the car crested a small hill, the vineyard came into view. Endless rows of grapevines stretched across the landscape, their green leaves glinting in the afternoon sun. At the heart of the property stood a modest house with a terracotta roof, its weathered shutters and sprawling porch exuding a rustic charm that Sophia found utterly foreign. Ramon pulled the car to a stop in front of the house. The gravel driveway crunched under the wheels, and the dust settled as the engine died. "We've arrived, Miss Sophia," Ramon announced, stepping out to open her door. Sophia hesitated before climbing out. Her designer heels immediately sank into the gravel, and she wobbled slightly, muttering a curse under her breath. She looked around, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings with a mixture of disbelief and unease. "Miss Kensington," a voice, warm and kind, called out from the porch. Sophia turned to see an older woman approaching, her grey hair pulled back into a neat bun. She wore a simple apron over a floral blouse, and her face was lined with gentle wrinkles that spoke of years spent under the sun. "I'm Carmen, the housekeeper," the woman said, extending a hand. "Welcome to the vineyard." Sophia forced a polite smile, taking the woman's hand briefly. "Thank you. Where should I—" "Let me show you to your room," Carmen interrupted, gesturing toward the house. "You must be tired from your journey." Tired wasn't the word Sophia would use. Irritated, maybe. Trapped, definitely. As she followed Carmen inside, Sophia's first impression of the house was one of simplicity. The wooden floors creaked underfoot, and the air smelled faintly of lavender and baked bread. Family photos hung on the walls alongside paintings of the vineyard and the surrounding countryside. It was nothing like the sleek, modern penthouse she had left behind. "This will be your room," Carmen said, opening the door to a small bedroom. Sophia stepped inside, her gaze sweeping the space. The room was quaint, with a wrought-iron bed covered by a handmade quilt, a wooden wardrobe, and a small desk by the window. Through the glass, she could see the sprawling vineyard stretching out into the horizon. "I'll leave you to settle in," Carmen said with a smile. "Dinner will be ready in an hour." Once the door closed behind her, Sophia let out a frustrated groan. She tossed her handbag onto the bed and paced the room, her heels clicking against the floor. The entire place felt like it belonged in another century. After a quick shower, made infuriating by the lack of luxury toiletries, Sophia changed into a casual outfit and headed downstairs. The dining table was already set when she arrived. Freshly baked bread, roasted vegetables, and a hearty stew filled the room with their earthy aroma. Seated at the table was a man she hadn't seen before, a stocky figure in his 60s with sun-weathered skin and sharp, kind eyes. "Miss Kensington," he greeted, standing to shake her hand. "I'm Don Miguel, the foreman here at the vineyard. It's a pleasure to meet you." Sophia shook his hand, noting the roughness of his calloused palms. "Sophia," she replied shortly, sitting down. Don Miguel smiled as he returned to his seat. "I hope you'll find your time here enlightening." "Time here?" Sophia frowned. "I'm not planning to stay long." Don Miguel chuckled softly. "That's what they all say." Sophia narrowed her eyes at his cryptic comment, but didn't respond. Instead, she focused on the food, which was surprisingly delicious, despite its humble appearance. As the meal progressed, Don Miguel explained the vineyard's operations, how the vines were tended, how the grapes were harvested and processed, and how each bottle of wine carried the history of the land. "You'll see it all for yourself tomorrow," he said with a smile. "Tomorrow?" Sophia blinked. "Work starts at sunrise," he replied matter-of-factly. "Work?" she repeated, incredulous. "I don't think you understand. I'm not here to, do manual labor." Don Miguel leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. "If you're staying here, Miss Kensington, you'll contribute. That's how it works." Sophia opened her mouth to argue, but Carmen's voice interrupted. "Eat first, dear. You'll need your strength." The table fell silent, leaving Sophia to stew in her disbelief. Work? Contribute? She had never done a day of labor in her life, and she wasn't about to start now. Later that night, Sophia stood by the window in her room, staring out at the moonlit vineyard. The rows of vines seemed endless, stretching into the darkness like veins across the earth. Her father's words from their last conversation echoed in her mind. "This isn't punishment. It's perspective." She scoffed at the idea. Perspective. This felt like exile. Yet, as the cool night breeze drifted through the open window, Sophia felt a strange flicker of curiosity. This land had belonged to her mother, a woman she barely remembered, a woman her father never spoke of. What had her mother seen in this place? The thought lingered as Sophia climbed into bed, pulling the quilt over herself. Tomorrow she would face the vineyard and whatever lessons it had to offer. Sophia woke to the shrill crow of a rooster, a sound so foreign and jarring that it startled her awake. She groaned, rolling over in the small, unfamiliar bed. The sunlight streaming through the thin curtains was unforgiving, announcing the start of a new day. She glanced at the alarm clock on the bedside table. 5:47 a.m. Back in Manhattan, she wouldn't even be thinking about waking up for another 4 hours. With a resigned sigh, she swung her legs over the side of the bed and touched her feet to the cold wooden floor. When she arrived downstairs, the dining room was already a flurry of activity. Carmen bustled around with plates of fresh tortillas, scrambled eggs and sliced avocado. Don Miguel sat at the head of the table, sipping coffee from a chipped ceramic mug. "Good morning, Miss Kensington," he greeted, his tone far too cheerful for the early hour. Sophia mumbled a reply and slid into a chair. Carmen placed a plate in front of her, the food steaming and smelling earthy but unfamiliar. "You'll need energy," Don Miguel said, nodding toward her plate. "Today's work will be enlightening." Sophia picked at her food, her appetite dampened by the thought of manual labor. As much as she wanted to argue, there was something about Don Miguel's steady demeanor that made it clear there was no room for negotiation. After breakfast, Carmen handed her a pair of worn work gloves and a sun hat. Sophia stared at them like they were alien artifacts. "What am I supposed to do with these?" she asked, holding the gloves between two fingers as if they were contaminated. "Wear them," Don Miguel replied curtly. "The sun's harsh, and the vines don't care how delicate your hands are." Sophia sighed dramatically, but followed him outside. The vineyard was alive with activity. Workers moved efficiently through the rows of grapevines, their hands quick and sure as they pruned, tied, and inspected the plants. Don Miguel led Sophia to an older worker, a woman with tan, weathered skin and a kind smile. "This is Lucia," he said. "She'll show you what to do." Lucia smiled warmly. "Welcome, Miss Kensington. Have you ever worked in a vineyard before?" Sophia gave her a withering look. "Take a guess," Lucia chuckled. "It's simple enough. We're pruning today. Follow me and I'll show you." Sophia trailed behind as Lucia explained the process. She demonstrated how to identify the unnecessary shoots and clip them to ensure the vine's energy went into producing the best grapes. It seemed straightforward enough until Sophia tried it herself. Her first few attempts were disasters. She snipped at the wrong shoots, dropped the pruning shears in the dirt, and managed to get her gloves tangled in the vines. "Careful," Lucia said gently, stepping in to guide her. "Like this. You see?" Sophia bit her lip, her frustration mounting. The work was tedious, her hands already sore despite the gloves, and the sun beat down mercilessly. By the time the mid-morning break arrived, she was drenched in sweat and ready to give up. She found a shaded spot under a tree and collapsed onto the ground, pulling off her gloves and hat. The other workers sat in small groups, chatting and laughing as they shared snacks and water. Sophia felt out of place, a stark contrast to their camaraderie. She pulled out her phone, hoping for a distraction, but there was no signal, no messages, no notifications. For the first time in years, she felt completely disconnected. Lucia appeared beside her, handing her a bottle of water. "It gets easier," she said with a smile. Sophia accepted the bottle reluctantly. "I doubt it." Lucia laughed softly. "The vines are like people. You have to pay attention. Be patient. If you rush, you'll miss the signs of what they need." Sophia didn't reply, but the comment lingered in her mind. The afternoon brought more challenges. Don Miguel assigned her to tie the vines to their trellises, a task that required precision and strength. Each knot felt like a small victory, but the process was slow and grueling. By the time the day ended, Sophia's hands were blistered despite the gloves, her arms ached, and her legs felt like lead. Back at the house, she barely made it to the bathroom before collapsing onto the edge of the tub. The water ran over her hands as she stared at her reflection in the mirror. Her face was flushed from the sun, and strands of hair stuck to her damp forehead. She looked nothing like the polished, perfect version of herself she'd been in Manhattan. And yet, she didn't hate it. The thought startled her. She pushed it aside, drying her hands and heading downstairs for dinner. That evening, Carmen served a hearty stew and fresh bread. The simple meal was a far cry from the gourmet dishes Sophia was used to, but she found herself eating with unexpected appetite. As the meal wound down, Don Miguel leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You survived your first day." "Barely," Sophia muttered. "Good. Tomorrow, we'll see how well you adapt." Sophia raised an eyebrow. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" Don Miguel chuckled. "The vineyard teaches lessons you won't find anywhere else. You might even thank me someday." Sophia doubted that, but she didn't argue. Exhaustion was quickly overtaking her, and the thought of climbing into bed was too appealing to waste energy on a comeback. As she lay in the dark that night, her muscles aching and her mind spinning, Sophia thought about Lucia's words. "The vines are like people. You have to pay attention, be patient." She wasn't sure what the vineyard had to teach her, but for the first time she felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. Maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to care. The next morning, Sophia awoke to the now familiar crowing of the rooster. Her body protested as she swung her legs out of bed, her muscles stiff and aching from the previous day. Still, she forced herself to get dressed, pulling on the plain jeans and shirt Carmen had thoughtfully left folded at the edge of her bed. Downstairs, breakfast was simple but satisfying: fresh eggs, toast, and coffee. Sophia ate quickly, eager to avoid Don Miguel's amused remarks about her pace, and made her way to the vineyard. Today, Don Miguel led her to a different part of the vineyard, where the younger vines grew in neat rows. These vines required more attention, he explained, as they were more fragile and prone to disease. "Your job today," he said, handing her a small bucket, "is to inspect the leaves for signs of mildew or pests. Anything unusual, you pluck it off and toss it in here." Sophia stared at the bucket, then at the endless rows of vines. "You want me to look at every leaf?" "That's the idea," he said with a grin. Sophia sighed but set to work. The task was painstaking and monotonous. Each leaf had to be examined closely, and the sun bore down on her relentlessly. Her arms ached as she reached and twisted, and her back protested after hours of bending. At first, her thoughts wandered aimlessly. She replayed arguments with her father, imagined herself back in the comfort of her penthouse, and cursed the situation she'd been forced into. But as the hours passed, she began to notice things she hadn't before. The way the light filtered through the vines, casting intricate patterns on the soil. The soft hum of bees moving between the flowers. The faint, sweet smell of the grapes ripening under the sun. By midday, she had filled the bucket halfway with wilted leaves and clusters of insects. Don Miguel appeared beside her, his hat shading his weathered face. "Not bad," he said, peering into the bucket. "You're paying attention. That's good." Sophia didn't reply. She was too exhausted to muster a sarcastic comment. "Come," he said, motioning for her to follow. He led her to a small clearing at the edge of the vineyard where a wooden bench sat beneath an old oak tree. A worker had set out a pitcher of water and a basket of fresh fruit. Sophia sank onto the bench with a grateful sigh, pouring herself a glass of water. "You see those vines?" Don Miguel asked, gesturing toward a patch of older plants nearby. Sophia nodded. "They've been here for over 50 years, weathered storms, droughts, pests, and they're still standing," he said, his tone thoughtful. "They're resilient because someone cared for them, paid attention to them year after year." Sophia glanced at him, unsure what to say. He continued, "You remind me of those young vines. Fragile, unsure of yourself, but with care and effort, you'll find your strength." Sophia looked away, her gaze drifting back to the vines. She wasn't sure if she agreed with him, but his words stayed with her as she returned to work that afternoon. That evening, after dinner, Sophia wandered outside. The vineyard was bathed in moonlight, the rows of vines glowing softly under the stars. The air was cool and still, a sharp contrast to the chaotic energy of Manhattan nights. She found herself drawn to the edge of the property where a small wooden shed stood. Curious, she pushed open the creaky door. Inside, she found a collection of old tools, dusty bottles, and a stack of faded notebooks. One of the notebooks caught her eye. Its cover was worn, the edges frayed, but the initials LM were scrawled across it in delicate handwriting. Sophia hesitated before picking it up. She flipped through the pages, her breath catching as she read the words. The notebook belonged to her mother. Each page was filled with notes about the vineyard, observations about the vines, sketches of the land, and personal reflections. One passage, in particular, caught Sophia's attention. "This vineyard is more than land. It's a home, a sanctuary, a place where life grows and love endures." Sophia sat down on an old stool, her hands trembling slightly as she turned the pages. The words painted a picture of a woman she barely remembered, someone who had poured her heart into this place. Her thoughts were interrupted by Carmen's voice calling from the house. "Sophia, dear, it's getting late." Reluctantly, Sophia closed the notebook and slipped it into her pocket. She would return to it later. As she walked back to the house, the stars above her seemed brighter, the air fresher. For the first time since arriving, she felt a small sense of connection to the vineyard and to the mother she had lost. Sophia climbed into bed that night, her body exhausted, but her mind restless. The notebook lay on the nightstand, a reminder of the mystery surrounding her mother's life. Why had her father never spoken about this place? What other secrets was he keeping? She didn't have the answers yet, but for the first time she wanted to find them. The next morning, Sophia awoke with a renewed sense of curiosity. Her body still ached from the previous days, but her mind lingered on the notebook she had found. It felt like a fragile thread connecting her to the mother she barely remembered, and she was desperate to unravel its meaning. After breakfast, Don Miguel assigned her to work in the southern section of the vineyard, an area where the older vines grew. These vines, he explained, required careful pruning and tying to maintain their strength. Sophia worked quietly, her hands moving with slightly more confidence than before. As the sun rose higher, her thoughts kept drifting back to the notebook. What had her mother seen in this place? Why had she poured so much of herself into it? By the time the lunch break arrived, Sophia could no longer resist. She returned to the shaded spot where she had left her gloves and hat and pulled the notebook from her bag. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened it to the next entry. The vineyard isn't just a place to grow grapes. It's where life teaches patience, resilience, and care. I dream that one day my daughter will walk among these vines and feel the same connection to the land that I do. Sophia's breath hitched. She ran her fingers over the words, imagining her mother writing them. The pages continued with detailed observations of the vineyard, sketches of grape clusters, and notes about the workers who had become part of her mother's extended family. "Finding something interesting?" Sophia nearly jumped, slamming the notebook shut. Don Miguel stood a few feet away, his expression curious but unreadable. "It's just something I found in the shed," Sophia said, her voice guarded. Don Miguel sat down on the grass beside her, removing his hat and wiping his brow. "That shed holds a lot of history. Your mother spent countless hours there, working on plans for the vineyard." "You knew her?" Sophia asked, her voice softer now. Don Miguel nodded. "I worked for your grandparents before your father took over. Your mother came here as a young bride, full of ideas and passion for this land. She brought life to this place in ways no one else could. Sophia hesitated before asking the question that had been gnawing at her. Why didn't my father ever talk about her work here, or this vineyard at all? Don Miguel sighed deeply, his gaze fixed on the vines swaying gently in the breeze. Your father and your mother had different visions. She saw this place as a home, a sanctuary. For him, it was just another asset. Sophia's stomach tightened at his words. It wasn't hard to imagine her father dismissing the vineyard as unimportant, just like he often dismissed her feelings. She left something behind here, Don Miguel continued, his voice softer. Something she hoped you would one day discover. Sophia clutched the notebook tighter. What do you mean? I can't tell you that, he said with a small smile. But if you keep looking, I think you'll find your answers. Sophia spent the rest of the afternoon deep in thought. The tasks that had once felt unbearable now seemed to pass quickly as her mind worked through the pieces of the puzzle. What else had her mother left behind? And why had her father hidden it from her? That evening after dinner, Sophia found herself wandering the property again. The stars above were brighter than she had ever seen in Manhattan, their light illuminating the vineyard in a way that felt almost magical. She carried the notebook with her, unable to let it out of her sight. Her footsteps led her to the edge of the property, where a small stone bench sat beneath a sprawling oak tree. The air was cool, and the night was quiet, except for the soft chirping of crickets. Sophia opened the notebook once more, flipping to the last entry. If you're reading this, my dearest Sophia, it means you've found your way back to the vineyard. I've always believed this land has the power to heal and teach, just as it did for me. My greatest wish is for you to feel its magic and discover the strength I know is within you. Love always, Mum. Tears welled up in Sophia's eyes. For years, she had felt lost, disconnected, like a hollow version of herself moving through life. But here, under the stars with her mother's words in her hands, she felt something she hadn't in a long time, a sense of belonging. As she closed the notebook, a new determination took root within her. She didn't have all the answers yet, but she was certain of one thing. She wasn't ready to leave the vineyard, not until she uncovered everything her mother had left for her. The vineyard wasn't just a place anymore. It was a part of her, and she intended to honor it. The morning sun was just breaking over the horizon when Sophia arrived at the main barn, where Don Miguel had asked her to meet him. The barn, with its weathered wooden doors and the faint smell of hay, looked like something out of a postcard. But today, it would hold something far more challenging than a picturesque moment. Good, you're on time, Don Miguel said, his hat tilted slightly against the morning light. Today you're going to learn about the harvest process. This is one of the most critical jobs on the vineyard. Sophia adjusted the brim of her sun hat, already feeling the weight of the day ahead. I thought the harvest happened later in the year. For most of the vineyard, yes, Don Miguel replied, but we have a small section of early ripening grapes we use for specialty blends. Those need to be picked now. I'll show you how. He led her to a section of vines separated by a small white picket fence. The grapes here were darker, almost black, and hung in heavy clusters. Workers were already busy, their movements quick and practiced as they cut the fruit from the vines and placed them into baskets. Don Miguel handed Sophia a pair of clippers and a basket. You'll need to be careful. The fruit must stay intact, and we're looking for clusters that are fully ripe. No green, no blemishes. Sophia hesitated, glancing at the workers around her. Their efficiency made her feel clumsy by comparison. You've got this, Don Miguel said, his tone encouraging. Sophia nodded and bent toward the nearest vine. The first few attempts were slow and awkward. Her hands shook slightly as she snipped the stems, and she accidentally crushed one cluster by gripping it too tightly. "Not so hard," Don Miguel called from nearby. "Grapes are delicate. Treat them like they're worth a fortune." Sophia rolled her eyes but focused. As the minutes turned into hours, her movements became steadier. She found a rhythm: snip, gently place, move to the next vine. It wasn't glamorous, but it was strangely satisfying. By midday, her basket was nearly full, and her arms ached from the repetitive motion. She wiped her forehead with the back of her hand, leaving a streak of dirt across her skin. Lucia appeared beside her, her own basket brimming with grapes. "You're getting better," she said with a smile. "Thanks," Sophia replied, surprised by the compliment. Lucia tilted her head toward the main house. "Come on, it's time to see what happens next." Sophia followed her to the processing area, where workers sorted the grapes and fed them into a machine that separated the fruit from the stems. The smell of crushed grapes filled the air, sweet and earthy. "This is where the magic begins," Lucia said, gesturing to the rows of barrels lined up nearby. Sophia watched as workers poured the grape juice into the barrels, sealing them tightly. "How long does it take to make wine?" Lucia shrugged. "Depends on the blend. Some of these barrels won't be opened for years." Sophia stared at the barrels, trying to imagine the patience it must take to wait so long for something to come to fruition. It was a stark contrast to her old life, where everything had been immediate. Instant gratification, instant results. As they walked back to the house for lunch, Lucia asked, "You seem different today. What changed?" Sophia hesitated, her fingers brushing against the notebook tucked in her pocket. "I found something. Something my mom left behind." Lucia's expression softened. She loved this place. Everyone here still talks about her. "What was she like?" Sophia asked, her voice quiet. Lucia smiled wistfully. "Kind, strong. She treated everyone here like family. She had this way of making people feel seen, like they mattered." Sophia felt a pang of longing. She wanted to know more, to fill in the gaps in her memory of her mother. After lunch, Sophia returned to the vines, determined to finish her section before the day ended. She worked in silence, her hands steady and her focus sharp. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the vineyard in hues of gold and orange, Sophia carried her last basket to the processing area. Don Miguel was waiting, his arms crossed and a satisfied smile on his face. "You did good today," he said. "Thanks," Sophia replied, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. He studied her for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You remind me of her, your mother." Sophia froze, her heart skipping a beat. "How?" "The way you're starting to care," he said simply. "It's in your eyes." Sophia didn't know how to respond. She looked down at her hands, stained with grape juice and dirt, and felt a strange mix of pride and sadness. That night, as she sat by the window in her room, Sophia opened the notebook again. The pages felt more alive now, her mother's words carrying a weight she hadn't understood before. The vineyard is a place where life unfolds slowly, but with purpose. It teaches you that the best things take time. Sophia closed the notebook, her resolve growing stronger. She wasn't just here to escape Manhattan or to satisfy her father's idea of perspective. She was here to understand, to piece together the story of her mother and the land she had loved so deeply. Tomorrow, she would ask Carmen and Don Miguel more questions. She would explore every corner of the vineyard if she had to. For the first time in years, Sophia felt like she was moving toward something real. The following day, Sophia woke earlier than usual, her mind buzzing with questions. She couldn't shake the feeling that the vineyard was more than just her mother's project. It was a key to understanding a life she had never been told about. After breakfast, she found Carmen in the kitchen, kneading dough for the day's bread. The older woman looked up with a welcoming smile. "Good morning, dear. You're up early." Sophia hesitated, unsure of how to approach the subject. "Carmen, can I ask you something about my mum?" Carmen's hand stilled for a moment, her expression softening. "Of course, child. What do you want to know?" Sophia pulled the notebook from her pocket, setting it on the table. "I found this. It's hers, isn't it?" Carmen wiped her hands on her apron and opened the notebook, her gaze lingering on the familiar handwriting. "Yes, this is hers. She used to carry it everywhere. I remember her sitting by the vines, sketching and writing while the workers bustled around her." Sophia leaned forward. "What was she like? I mean, not just as a person, but here. What did this place mean to her?" Carmen let out a small sigh, her eyes growing distant. "Your mother loved this vineyard more than anything. She saw it as a place of life and growth, not just for the vines, but for the people who worked here. She wanted this land to be a legacy, a gift to future generations, including you." Sophia's chest tightened. "Then why did she leave? Why did my father never talk about her or this place?" Carmen looked at her, sadness flickering across her face. "That's not my story to tell, Sophia. But I can tell you this. Your mother didn't leave because she wanted to." Before Sophia could ask more, Don Miguel entered the kitchen, his boots clunking heavily against the wooden floor. "Sophia," he said, "I need you at the North Orchard today. Some of the vines there are showing signs of distress." Sophia glanced at Carmen, who gave her an encouraging nod. "Go on, dear. There's always more to learn in the vineyard." Sophia followed Don Miguel out into the morning sunlight, her mind swirling with unanswered questions. The North Orchard was a small section of the vineyard, tucked away near a grove of olive trees. The vines here were older, their leaves slightly wilted under the summer heat. "These vines are struggling," Don Miguel explained, crouching to inspect the soil. "They're not getting enough water, and the roots are competing with those olive trees for nutrients. We'll need to rework the irrigation lines." Sophia kneeled beside him, watching as he dug into the dry soil with practiced hands. "Why didn't anyone notice this sooner?" she asked. "Sometimes you get so focused on the big picture that you miss the details," Don Miguel said. "That's why you always have to pay attention, especially in a place like this." Sophia nodded, picking up a spade to help loosen the earth. The work was exhausting, but it felt purposeful. As the hours passed, she found herself slipping into a rhythm, her mind calming as her hands worked. By midday, they had rerouted the irrigation system, and Sophia stood back, wiping sweat from her forehead as the first drops of water trickled into the dry soil. "Not bad," Don Miguel said with a nod of approval. Sophia smiled faintly, the sense of accomplishment warming her despite her aching muscles. That evening, as the workers gathered for a communal dinner, Sophia found herself sitting next to Lucia. The long table was filled with hearty dishes, grilled vegetables, fresh bread, and roasted chicken, and the sound of laughter and conversation filled the air. Lucia turned to Sophia, her smile warm. "You're fitting in more than you realize, you know." Sophia shook her head. "I still feel like an outsider. Everyone here seems so connected, like they belong." Lucia's expression softened. "Belonging isn't about where you come from, Sophia. It's about what you give to the people and the place around you. You've already started doing that." Sophia didn't reply, but her thoughts lingered on Lucia's words. Later that night, she sat in her room with the notebook open on her lap. She traced her fingers over the sketches of vines and landscapes, imagining her mother's hands creating them. One sketch caught her eye, a detailed drawing of the vineyard, but with something unusual. In the corner of the page was a small marking, a circle around an area near the southern boundary of the property. Sophia frowned. Her curiosity piqued. Why had her mother marked that spot? Determined to find out, she grabbed a flashlight and slipped out of the house. The night was cool, the moon casting a pale glow over the vineyard. She followed the map in the notebook, her footsteps crunching softly on the dirt paths. When she reached the marked spot, she stopped, shining her flashlight around. It was a small clearing, bordered by tall grass and wildflowers. In the center stood a low stone wall, weathered and covered in moss. Sophia approached the wall, her fingers brushing against the rough stone. As she inspected it more closely, she noticed something carved into one of the stones. Initials, faint but still visible. I.M. Her heart raced. These were her mother's initials. What was this place? Why had her mother marked it in the notebook? Sophia's mind buzzed with questions as she stood in the quiet clearing, the weight of the discovery settling over her. She knew this was just the beginning of uncovering the secrets her mother had left behind. She ran her fingers over the initials once more, a sense of determination surging through her. Whatever the truth was, she would find it. The next morning, Sophia couldn't shake the image of the stone wall and her mother's initials. It felt like an invitation, a hidden message meant to lead her somewhere, or to something. Determined to uncover more, she sought out Don Miguel after breakfast. She found him inspecting tools near the barn, his broad shoulders hunched as he sharpened a pair of pruning shears. "Don Miguel," Sophia began, her voice steady, despite the nerves fluttering in her chest. "I found something last night. A stone wall near the southern boundary of the vineyard. It had my mother's initials on it." Don Miguel froze for a moment before setting the shears down. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "The wall? You went there?" "Yes," Sophia said, studying his face for any hint of recognition. "What is it? Why did my mother mark it in her notebook?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "That wall, it's part of an old chapel. Your mother used to visit it often when she needed time to think. She called it her quiet place." "A chapel?" Sophia asked, her curiosity growing. "It hasn't been used for decades," Don Miguel explained. "But your mother saw something special in it. She believed it was a place of healing." Sophia felt a surge of emotion. "Why didn't anyone tell me about it before?" Don Miguel's eyes softened. "Because your father wanted to leave all of this behind. He thought the vineyard and everything tied to it was a distraction. But your mother disagreed. That's why she left these clues for you, Sophia. She wanted you to find your way back." Sophia looked away, her mind racing. Her mother's quiet place, hidden away at the edge of the vineyard, felt like a missing piece of a puzzle she was only beginning to understand. "Can you show me the rest of it?" she asked. Don Miguel hesitated, then nodded. "Come, I'll take you there." The two of them walked in silence, the morning sun casting long shadows over the vineyard. When they reached the clearing, Don Miguel pointed to the overgrown path that led beyond the stone wall. "Follow this," he said. "You'll find the old chapel at the end." Sophia didn't hesitate. She pushed through the tall grass and wildflowers, her heart pounding as the small structure came into view. The chapel was weathered and worn, its wooden door hanging slightly ajar. Vines crept up its walls, but the stone foundation stood strong. She stepped inside, her footsteps echoing softly against the stone floor. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of earth and age. Sunlight streamed through cracks in the roof, illuminating a simple wooden altar at the front of the room. Sophia walked toward the altar, her eyes scanning every detail. It was bare, except for a small, dust-covered box tucked into a corner. Her hands trembled as she picked up the box and opened it. Inside was a collection of items, a stack of letters tied with a ribbon, a delicate locket, and a small photograph of her mother, smiling beside the vineyard's vines. Sophia sat down on the floor, cradling the box in her lap. She untied the ribbon and unfolded the first letter. My dearest Sophia, if you're reading this, it means you've found the chapel. I hope it brought you the same peace it always gave me. This vineyard has always been a part of our family, a place of love and resilience. My greatest wish is for you to carry on its legacy and find the strength that lies within you. Love always, Mum. Tears blurred Sophia's vision as she read the words. For the first time, she felt truly connected to her mother, a woman she had lost too soon, but was now beginning to know. She stayed in the chapel for hours, reading every letter and holding the locket in her hands. The more she read, the more she understood her mother's love for the vineyard and the life she had built here. When she finally returned to the house, Don Miguel was waiting on the porch. "Find what you were looking for?" he asked. Sophia nodded, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "I did." "And what now?" Sophia looked out at the vineyard, the rows of vines stretching endlessly before her. For the first time, she didn't see it as a burden or a punishment. She saw it as an opportunity, a chance to honor her mother's memory and build something meaningful. "Now," she said, "I figure out how to make this place my own." The days that followed were unlike anything Sophia had experienced before. Each morning began at dawn, her hands growing more familiar with the rhythm of the vineyard. She pruned vines, checked irrigation systems, and even started to enjoy the hum of activity around her. But the box of letters from the chapel lingered in her mind. Every night, after dinner, she would read a few more, unraveling pieces of her mother's life and the dreams she had for the vineyard. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the vineyard in hues of gold and pink, Sophia sat on the porch with Carmen. "Your mother used to sit here too," Carmen said, handing Sophia a cup of tea. "She always said this view gave her hope." Sophia nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of the cup. "She wrote about wanting me to carry on her legacy, but I don't even know where to begin." Carmen smiled gently. "You've already begun. You're here, aren't you? That's more than anyone expected, including your father." Sophia frowned at the mention of her father. She hadn't heard from him since arriving at the vineyard, and part of her resented his silence. Yet another part of her was grateful for the distance. It allowed her to focus on the life she was building here. "I need to do more," Sophia said, her voice firm. "This place, it deserves more than just surviving. It deserves to thrive." Carmen's eyes twinkled. "Then you'll need help. No one can do it alone, Sophia, not even your mother." The next morning, Sophia gathered Don Miguel, Carmen, and a few of the workers in the main barn. The air was thick with curiosity as they stood around her. "I've been reading my mother's letters," Sophia began, her voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in her chest. She had big dreams for this vineyard. She wanted it to be more than just a business. She wanted it to be a home, a community. The workers exchanged glances, nodding in quiet agreement. "I want to make her dream a reality," Sophia continued. "But I can't do it alone. I need all of you." Don Miguel crossed his arms, a small smile tugging at his lips. "What exactly do you have in mind?" Sophia took a deep breath, her heart pounding. "I want to revitalize the vineyard. We'll improve the vines, expand production, and introduce a wine tasting experience that showcases the beauty of this land. And I want to start a program for local families, teaching them about winemaking and giving them a stake in what we create here." A murmur of approval rippled through the group. "You sound like your mother," Don Miguel said, his tone warm. "She always believed this place could bring people together." Sophia felt a swell of pride. Then let's make it happen. Over the next few weeks, the vineyard buzzed with new energy. Sophia threw herself into every aspect of the work, from repairing old equipment to brainstorming marketing ideas. She spent hours with Don Miguel, learning the intricacies of soil health and grape quality. Carmen helped her organize community events, starting with a small gathering for the workers and their families. One afternoon, as Sophia was sketching plans for the new tasting area, a car pulled into the driveway. She looked up, her heart sinking when she recognized the sleek black sedan. Her father stepped out, his tailored suit and polished shoes looking comically out of place against the rustic backdrop. "Dad," Sophia said, standing to greet him. Henry Kensington removed his sunglasses, his sharp gaze sweeping over the vineyard. "You've been busy," he said, his tone neutral. Sophia folded her arms, meeting his eyes. "I have? Why are you here?" Henry sighed, running a hand through his neatly combed hair. "I came to see how you were doing. I didn't expect this." He gestured to the activity around them, workers hauling supplies and tending to the vines. "I'm not the same person I was when I got here," Sophia said firmly. "This place has taught me more in a few weeks than I've learned in years, and I'm not leaving." Henry raised an eyebrow. "Not leaving?" "No," Sophia said, her voice unwavering. "I'm staying. I'm rebuilding this vineyard, just like Mom wanted." For a moment, Henry said nothing. His face was unreadable, his thoughts hidden behind the same guarded expression he always wore. Then, to Sophia's surprise, he nodded. "Your mother would be proud," he said quietly. Sophia's throat tightened at his words, but she refused to let her emotions show. "It's not just about her. This is about me, too. For the first time, I feel like I'm doing something that matters." Henry studied her, his expression softening. "If this is what you want, then you have my support. Whatever you need, just say the word." Sophia's eyes widened in surprise. "You mean that?" "I do," Henry said. "This vineyard is part of your heritage, and it's clear you've found your place here." As he left later that afternoon, Sophia felt a strange mix of emotions. The man who had always been distant and demanding had finally acknowledged her efforts. But more importantly, she had acknowledged herself. For the first time, she didn't need his approval to know she was doing the right thing. This vineyard was her home now, and she was ready to make it something extraordinary. The days that followed were unlike anything Sophia had experienced before. Each morning began at dawn, her hands growing more familiar with the rhythm of the vineyard. She pruned vines, checked irrigation systems, and even started to enjoy the hum of activity around her. But the box of letters from the chapel lingered in her mind. Every night after dinner, she would read a few more, unraveling pieces of her mother's life and the dreams she had for the vineyard. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the vineyard in hues of gold and pink, Sophia sat on the porch with Carmen. "Your mother used to sit here too," Carmen said, handing Sophia a cup of tea. "She always said this view gave her hope." Sophia nodded, her fingers tracing the edge of the cup. "She wrote about wanting me to carry on her legacy, but I don't even know where to begin." Carmen smiled gently. "You've already begun. You're here, aren't you? That's more than anyone expected, including your father." Sophia frowned at the mention of her father. She hadn't heard from him since arriving at the vineyard, and part of her resented his silence. Yet another part of her was grateful for the distance. It allowed her to focus on the life she was building here. "I need to do more," Sophia said, her voice firm. "This place, it deserves more than just surviving. It deserves to thrive." Carmen's eyes twinkled. "Then you'll need help. No one can do it alone, Sophia. Not even your mother." The next morning, Sophia gathered Don Miguel, Carmen, and a few of the workers in the main barn. The air was thick with curiosity as they stood around her. "I've been reading my mother's letters," Sophia began, her voice steady despite the nerves fluttering in her chest. "She had big dreams for this vineyard. She wanted it to be more than just a business. She wanted it to be a home, a community." The workers exchanged glances, nodding in quiet agreement. "I want to make her dream a reality," Sophia continued, "but I can't do it alone. I need all of you." Don Miguel crossed his arms, a small smile tugging at his lips. "What exactly do you have in mind?" Sophia took a deep breath, her heart pounding. "I want to revitalize the vineyard. We'll improve the vines, expand production, and introduce a wine-tasting experience that showcases the beauty of this land. And I want to start a program for local families, teaching them about winemaking and giving them a stake in what we create here." A murmur of approval rippled through the group. "You sound like your mother," Don Miguel said, his tone warm. "She always believed this place could bring people together." Sophia felt a swell of pride. "Then let's make it happen." Over the next few weeks, the vineyard buzzed with new energy. Sophia threw herself into every aspect of the work, from repairing old equipment to brainstorming marketing ideas. She spent hours with Don Miguel, learning the intricacies of soil health and grape quality. Carmen helped her organize community events, starting with a small gathering for the workers and their families. One afternoon, as Sophia was sketching plans for the new tasting area, a car pulled into the driveway. She looked up, her heart sinking when she recognized the sleek black sedan. Her father stepped out, his tailored suit and polished shoes looking comically out of place against the rustic backdrop. "Dad," Sophia said, standing to greet him. Henry Kensington removed his sunglasses, his sharp gaze sweeping over the vineyard. "You've been busy," he said, his tone neutral. Sophia folded her arms, meeting his eyes. "I have. Why are you here?" Henry sighed, running a hand through his neatly combed hair. "I came to see how you were doing. I didn't expect this." He gestured to the activity around them, workers hauling supplies and tending to the vines. "I'm not the same person I was when I got here," Sophia said firmly. "This place has taught me more in a few weeks than I've learned in years, and I'm not leaving." Henry raised an eyebrow. "Not leaving?" "No," Sophia said, her voice unwavering. "I'm staying. I'm rebuilding this vineyard, just like Mum wanted." For a moment, Henry said nothing. His face was unreadable, his thoughts hidden behind the same guarded expression he always wore. Then, to Sophia's surprise, he nodded. "Your mother would be proud," he said quietly. Sophia's throat tightened at his words, but she refused to let her emotions show. "It's not just about her. This is about me too. For the first time, I feel like I'm doing something that matters." Henry studied her, his expression softening. "If this is what you want, then you have my support. Whatever you need, just say the word." Sophia's eyes widened in surprise. "You mean that?" "I do," Henry said. "This vineyard is part of your heritage, and it's clear you've found your place here." As he left later that afternoon, Sophia felt a strange mix of emotions. The man who had always been distant and demanding had finally acknowledged her efforts. But more importantly, she had acknowledged herself. For the first time, she didn't need his approval to know she was doing the right thing. This vineyard was her home now, and she was ready to make it something extraordinary. Sophia had barely slept. The weight of her father's unexpected support lingered in her mind, but so did the realization that his arrival might bring complications. Henry Kensington was a man of control, and though he claimed to trust her judgment, Sophia knew better than to take his words at face value. The vineyard, her mother's legacy, was thriving again, but Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go wrong. The next morning, she found Don Miguel near the northern boundary of the property, where a few workers were repairing an old trellis. He looked up as she approached, his expression calm but curious. "You're up early," he remarked. "Couldn't sleep," Sophia replied, crossing her arms. "I've been thinking, my father's support, it feels too easy. He's never let me take the lead on anything, and now he's just stepping back." Don Miguel chuckled, wiping his hands on a rag. "You're learning something important about trust, Sophia. It's earned, not given. If you want him to respect your decisions, you'll have to prove this vineyard is worth fighting for." Sophia frowned. "What do you mean?" Before Don Miguel could answer, a truck pulled into the driveway, its engine rumbling loudly. A man in a sharp suit stepped out, holding a clipboard. His presence immediately felt out of place, a reminder of the corporate world Sophia had left behind. Don Miguel's face darkened. "That's a land assessor. Your father must have sent him." Sophia's stomach dropped. "What? Why?" Don Miguel sighed. "When your father first inherited this vineyard, he considered selling it. He might be revisiting that idea now, especially with the improvements you've made." Sophia felt a surge of anger. "He can't just sell it. This isn't just land. It's our family's history." Don Miguel placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Then you need to show him why it's worth keeping. Talk to him, Sophia. But first, talk to the assessor. Learn what he's here for." Sophia approached the man, her heart pounding. He introduced himself as Mr. Blakely, explaining that he was conducting an appraisal of the property. "For what purpose?" Sophia demanded, her tone sharper than she intended. "I'm just following orders, Miss Kensington," Mr. Blakely said smoothly. "Your father requested a valuation to determine the vineyard's current worth." Sophia clenched her fists. This was exactly what she had feared. That evening, after confronting Mr. Blakely, she called her father. Henry's voice was calm, almost too calm, as he answered. "Hello, Sophia." "Dad? Why is there a land assessor here? Are you planning to sell the vineyard?" Henry paused, his silence only fueling her frustration. "I haven't made any decisions yet, but you've done good work there, and the vineyard's value has increased. It's a smart business move to consider our options." "Options?" Sophia's voice rose. "This isn't a business deal. This is Mom's legacy. You can't just sell it off like it's nothing." Henry sighed. "Sophia, this vineyard has cost our family more than you know. Your mother poured her heart into it, but it never turned a profit. I don't want you tied to something that could drag you down." "I'm not tied to it," Sophia said, her voice firm. "I'm choosing it. And if you can't see its value, then you never really understood what Mum was trying to do." Her father was silent for a long moment. "Sophia, if you want to keep the vineyard, then prove it's sustainable. Show me a plan, otherwise I can't justify holding on to it." When the call ended, Sophia felt both furious and determined. She refused to let her father's pragmatism erase everything her mother had worked for. The next morning she gathered Don Miguel, Carmen, and the workers in the main barn. "We have a problem," Sophia began, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. "My father is considering selling the vineyard. He doesn't see its worth, at least not beyond the monetary value. But we're going to change that." Carmen looked alarmed, while Don Miguel nodded knowingly. "What's the plan?" he asked. Sophia took a deep breath. "We'll host an event, a wine-tasting showcase, but bigger. We'll invite buyers, restaurateurs, and local families. We'll show them what makes this place special, the history, the community, and the product. If we can generate interest and potential partnerships, it will prove the vineyard can thrive." The workers murmured among themselves, their expressions a mix of doubt and hope. Lucia stepped forward, her face determined. "We'll help. Your mother believed in this place, and so do we." Encouraged by their support, Sophia spent the next week planning every detail. She worked alongside Carmen to prepare the food, enlisted Don Miguel to guide guests through the vineyard, and even convinced Lucia to share her personal story of how the vineyard had changed her life. On the day of the event, the vineyard was transformed. Strings of lights hung between the trees, tables were set with white linens and fresh flowers, and the air buzzed with anticipation. Sophia wore a simple but elegant dress, her mother's locket around her neck. She greeted each guest personally, her confidence growing with every handshake and smile. As the sun set, casting the vineyard in a golden glow, Sophia stood before the gathered crowd. She spoke about her mother's vision, the challenges they had overcome, and the future she wanted to build. "This vineyard isn't just a business," she said, her voice carrying over the quiet murmurs of the guests. "It's a place where life grows, where people come together, and where stories are made. It's my home, and I hope it can become a part of your story too." When she finished, the crowd erupted in applause. Sophia felt a swell of pride as she looked out at the faces of those who believed in her vision. Later that night, as the event wound down, her father arrived unannounced. He stood at the edge of the gathering, watching quietly. Sophia approached him, her heart pounding. "Well?" Henry nodded, a rare smile touching his lips. "You've proven your point. This vineyard is worth more than I realized." Sophia felt a wave of relief. "So, you'll let me keep it?" Henry met her gaze. "It's yours, Sophia. You've earned it." As he turned to leave, Sophia felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The vineyard, her mother's legacy, was safe, and it was hers to protect. Sophia's confidence in her plans for the vineyard was growing, but the weight of responsibility pressed heavily on her shoulders. Each step forward felt like a test of her resolve, especially now that her father had offered his unexpected support. That morning, as the workers gathered in the barn to discuss the next phase of the vineyard's revitalization, Don Miguel stood by her side, his calm presence grounding her. The group listened attentively as Sophia laid out plans for expanding the vineyard's production and opening it to the public for tours and tastings. But as the meeting concluded, Don Miguel pulled her aside. "Sophia," he said, his tone measured, "there's something you need to know before we move forward with these changes." Sophia's stomach tightened at his serious expression. "What is it?" He hesitated before continuing. "When your mother passed, your father took out a loan to keep the vineyard running. That loan is still hanging over this place like a storm cloud. If we don't start turning a profit soon, the bank will come for it." Sophia felt her breath catch. "What? Why didn't anyone tell me this before?" "Your father didn't want you to worry," Don Miguel said, his voice calm but firm. "But this vineyard is at a tipping point. Your plans are good, Sophia, but they need to work, quickly." Sophia nodded, her mind racing. The stakes were higher than she had realized. She spent the rest of the day poring over budgets and projections with Carmen, who had kept meticulous records of the vineyard's finances over the years. Together, they identified areas where costs could be cut and profits maximized, but even with their best efforts, the numbers didn't add up. By the evening, Sophia's frustration boiled over. She stepped outside to clear her head, the cool night air wrapping around her as she walked aimlessly among the vines. She ended up at the stone chapel, its weathered walls a quiet reminder of her mother's presence. Sitting on the steps, she pulled out the locket she had found in the box. Opening it, she gazed at the tiny photograph inside, her mother laughing in the sunlight, her eyes full of joy. "What would you do, Mom?" Sophia whispered. The next morning, Henry's unexpected arrival broke her train of thought. His black sedan pulled into the driveway, and he stepped out, looking uncharacteristically tired. "Sophia," he said, his tone softer than she had ever heard it. "Don Miguel told me what's going on. We need to talk." Sophia crossed her arms, her frustration bubbling to the surface. "So now you're concerned. You let this place get to the edge of collapse, and now you want to help." Henry sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I made mistakes, Sophia. Your mother loved this vineyard, but I never understood it the way she did. After she was gone, it was easier to push it away than to face what I'd lost." Sophia stared at him, her anger softening as she saw the pain in his eyes. For the first time, she realized that her father's distance wasn't just indifference, it was grief. "I'm not letting this place go," Sophia said firmly. "I'll do whatever it takes to save it." Henry nodded. "Then I'll help you, but it won't be easy. The bank won't wait forever." The two of them spent hours working through solutions. Henry used his connections to arrange meetings with potential investors, while Sophia focused on preparing the vineyard for its first public event, a wine-tasting fundraiser to draw attention and support. As the event approached, the vineyard buzzed with activity. Carmen oversaw the kitchen, preparing appetizers to pair with the wines, while Lucia worked with the workers to ensure every vine looked its best. On the night of the fundraiser, the vineyard was transformed. Twinkling lights hung above the rows of vines, and tables were set with crisp linens and bouquets of wildflowers. Guests began to arrive, their curiosity piqued by the promise of a unique experience. Sophia moved through the crowd, her heart pounding as she greeted potential investors and guests. She had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable. But she also had never felt so determined. Henry stood off to the side, watching her with an expression of quiet pride. As the evening unfolded, the guests were treated to tours of the vineyard, tastings of the early harvest wines, and stories about the land's history. Sophia spoke passionately about her mother's vision, her words weaving a connection between the past and the future. By the end of the night, several guests approached her with offers of support. One investor, a local businessman with a deep appreciation for winemaking, expressed interest in partnering with the vineyard. When the last guest had left and the lights were dimmed, Sophia stood among the vines, exhaustion and relief washing over her. Henry joined her, his hands in his pockets. "You did it," he said. Sophia shook her head. "We're not out of the woods yet, but it's a start." Henry nodded, his gaze drifting over the vineyard. "Your mother would be proud of you, Sophia. You've brought this place back to life." Sophia smiled, her chest tightening with a mix of emotion. For the first time, she felt like she truly belonged, not just to the vineyard, but to her mother's legacy. And as she stood there, surrounded by the land her mother had loved, Sophia knew she wouldn't stop until the vineyard was everything it was meant to be. The weeks following the fundraiser were some of the busiest of Sophia's life. With the initial investment secured, she poured all her energy into executing her plans for the vineyard. The expansion wasn't just about the wine, it was about creating a destination that honored her mother's vision. Don Miguel oversaw the workers as they upgraded the vineyard's irrigation system and cleared space for the new tasting area. Carmen and Lucia organized the community outreach programs, inviting local families to participate in workshops about winemaking and the history of the land. Sophia threw herself into every detail, from selecting the perfect branding for their wine bottles to designing the layout for the tasting room. But even as the vineyard buzzed with progress, the looming threat of the bank lingered in the back of her mind. One afternoon, as she reviewed the latest financial reports in the office, Henry walked in. He looked more relaxed than she'd seen him in years, his usual polished demeanor softened by the time he'd spent at the vineyard. "How's it looking?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. Sophia sighed, gesturing to the spreadsheet on her laptop. "We're making progress, but it's not fast enough. The bank wants another payment by the end of the quarter, and even with the fundraiser, we're still short. Henry frowned, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. We'll figure it out. You're not doing this alone. Sophia glanced at him, her frustration bubbling to the surface. I know you mean well, Dad, but part of me wonders if this is just a way for you to fix your own mistakes. Henry's face hardened for a moment, but then he nodded slowly. You're not wrong, he admitted. I let your mother down when she needed me most. I didn't understand what this place meant to her, and I didn't understand what it could mean to you. But I'm trying, Sophia. I want to make it right, not just for her, but for us. Sophia's anger softened. It's not about making things right. It's about building something that lasts, something worth fighting for. Henry smiled faintly. Then let's keep fighting. The next few days were a blur of activity. Sophia and Henry worked tirelessly to finalize a deal with the investor who had shown interest at the fundraiser. It was a delicate balancing act, preserving the vineyard's independence while ensuring the financial security they desperately needed. One evening, as Sophia walked through the vineyard, the setting sun casting a golden glow over the vines, she spotted Lucia sitting on a low stone wall near the old chapel. Sophia approached, her steps light against the dirt path. Mind some company? Lucia smiled, patting the spot beside her. Not at all. Sophia sat down, her gaze drifting over the vineyard. You've been here a long time, haven't you? Lucia nodded. Almost 30 years. I started working here when your grandparents ran the place. I've seen it go through its highs and lows. Why did you stay? Sophia asked. Lucia's smile softened. Because this land has a way of getting under your skin. It's not just a job, it's a part of you. Your mother understood that better than anyone. She made all of us feel like we belonged here. Sophia's throat tightened. I want to make it that way again. For everyone. You already are, Lucia said gently. Sophia glanced at her, surprised by the words. Do you really think so? Lucia nodded. People believe in you, Sophia. And not just because of your mother. They see how much you care, how hard you're working. That means something. The next morning, Henry called Sophia into the office, his expression unusually serious. We have a problem, he said, handing her a letter from the bank. Sophia scanned the document, her stomach sinking. The bank had moved up the payment deadline, giving them less than a week to come up with the funds. This isn't fair, she said, her voice rising. We're making progress. They know that. Henry nodded grimly. They don't care. They're looking for an excuse to seize the property. Sophia felt a wave of panic, but she forced herself to take a deep breath. We're not giving up. We still have options. She spent the next few days reaching out to every contact she could think of. Investors, local businesses, even nearby wineries. The stress was overwhelming, but she refused to let herself give in to despair. On the final day before the deadline, a breakthrough came. The investor from the fundraiser agreed to provide an advance on their partnership deal, enough to cover the bank's demands and keep the vineyard afloat. When the payment cleared, Sophia let out a shaky breath of relief. You did it, Henry said, his voice filled with pride. We did it, Sophia corrected. As the vineyard settled back into its rhythm, Sophia felt a renewed sense of purpose. The fight to save the land had tested her in ways she hadn't expected, but it had also shown her what she was capable of. This vineyard wasn't just her mother's legacy, it was her own, and she was determined to make it thrive. With the vineyard's immediate financial crisis resolved, Sophia felt a rare moment of peace as she walked among the vines one early morning. The sun was just beginning to rise, bathing the land in a warm golden light. The vines, now thriving under the new irrigation system and meticulous care, seemed to hum with life. For the first time, Sophia allowed herself to believe that the vineyard's future was secure. But she also knew there was more to do. Her mother's dream wasn't just about sustaining the vineyard. It was about building a community, a legacy that would last for generations. She met Henry in the tasting room, where workers were finishing the final touches for its grand opening. Wooden beams framed the space, and large glass windows looked out over the vineyard. A long bar lined one wall, with polished countertops and neatly displayed wine bottles. "It's perfect," Henry said, surveying the room with a rare smile. Sophia nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "It's a start, but there's still so much more I want to do." Henry chuckled. "You've done more in a few months than most people do in years. Give yourself some credit." Sophia glanced at him, surprised by the warmth in his tone. Their relationship, once marked by distance and tension, had softened in ways she hadn't expected. "Thanks, Dad," she said quietly. The grand opening of the tasting room was a resounding success. Guests from the local community and beyond gathered to celebrate the vineyard's revival. Sophia mingled with the crowd, sharing stories of her mother and the history of the land. Lucia and Carmen worked tirelessly behind the scenes, ensuring everything ran smoothly. Don Miguel gave impromptu tours of the vineyard, his deep knowledge and easy humor captivating the guests. As the sun set, casting a warm glow over the vineyard, Sophia stood on the balcony overlooking the festivities. She felt a profound sense of pride and gratitude. Henry joined her, holding a glass of wine. "Your mother would have loved this," he said, his voice tinged with emotion. Sophia looked at him, her own emotions bubbling to the surface. "She built this place. I'm just carrying on what she started." Henry shook his head. "You're doing more than that, Sophia. You're making it your own." And that's something she would have been proud of. The words settled over Sophia like a warm blanket, filling her with a sense of purpose. The days that followed were filled with a renewed energy. The tasting room became a hub of activity, drawing visitors who were eager to experience the vineyard's charm and learn about its history. Sophia worked tirelessly to expand their offerings, from guided tours to hands-on workshops where guests could try their hand at pruning vines or blending wines. But it wasn't just about the guests. Sophia continued to strengthen the bonds with her team, creating a sense of community that had been at the heart of her mother's vision. One evening, as she walked back to the house after a long day, she found herself at the stone chapel once more. The setting sun bathed the small structure in a warm glow, and she felt a familiar pull to step inside. Sitting on the wooden bench near the altar, Sophia opened her mother's notebook. The pages were worn from use, but they still carried the weight of her mother's dreams and wisdom. One entry caught her eye. "A vineyard, like life, is never truly finished. It's a work in progress, a place where growth and change go hand in hand. The key is to keep moving forward, to nurture what you've built and trust in its strength." Sophia closed the notebook, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and determination. Her mother's words had guided her this far, and she knew they would continue to light her path. As she stepped outside, the stars began to emerge, their light shimmering above the vines. Sophia took a deep breath, the cool night air filling her lungs. This was her home now, her legacy, and she was ready to face whatever challenges came next, knowing she had the strength, the support, and the vision to see it through. As the weeks passed, Sophia found herself fully immersed in the life of the vineyard. The tasting room had become a success, attracting visitors from nearby towns and even some curious tourists passing through. For the first time, the vineyard was not only surviving, it was thriving. But with success came new challenges. One morning, as Sophia reviewed the latest inventory reports in her office, Don Miguel entered with a serious expression. "We have a problem," he said, placing a small cluster of grapes on her desk. Sophia leaned forward, examining the grapes. Some were shriveled and spotted with a faint white film. "What is this?" she asked, her stomach tightening. "Powdery mildew," Don Miguel replied. "It's spreading in the east section. If we don't act fast, it could ruin this season's harvest." Sophia felt a wave of panic, but quickly steadied herself. "What do we need to do?" Don Miguel outlined a plan to contain the mildew, involving targeted treatments and increased monitoring of the vines. It would take time, resources, and a lot of effort from the team, but it was their best chance to save the crop. Sophia called a meeting with the workers, explaining the situation and rallying them to action. "We've faced challenges before," she said, her voice strong and steady. "And we've overcome them. This is no different. If we work together, we can protect what we've built." The team responded with determination, and the vineyard buzzed with activity as everyone pitched in to combat the mildew. Sophia spent hours in the fields alongside the workers, her hands stained with soil and her arms aching from the labor. As the days turned into weeks, the team's efforts began to pay off. The mildew was contained, and the vines in the east section showed signs of recovery. Sophia felt a deep sense of pride in what they had accomplished together. One evening, as the team gathered for a celebratory dinner, Henry stood to make a toast. "To Sophia," he said, raising his glass, "you've shown all of us what it means to fight for something you believe in. This vineyard wouldn't be where it is today without your vision and determination." The room erupted in applause, and Sophia felt her cheeks flush with pride and gratitude. After the dinner, as the workers headed home, Sophia found herself sitting on the porch with Henry. The air was cool and quiet, the stars shining brightly above. "You've changed, you know," Henry said, his voice thoughtful. Sophia looked at him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "When you came here, you were lost," Henry said. "Now you're stronger, more confident. You've found your place." Sophia smiled, her heart swelling with emotion. "I think I've finally figured out who I am, and it's because of this place, because of Mom." Henry nodded, his expression soft. "She'd be proud of you. I know I am." The words settled over Sophia, filling her with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. As she looked out over the vineyard, the rows of vines stretching into the distance, she knew that this was just the beginning. There would be more challenges, more hard work, but she was ready for all of it. The vineyard wasn't just a place anymore. It was her legacy, her home, and her future. Sophia awoke to the soft rustling of leaves outside her window, the golden morning light filtering through the curtains. The vineyard had never felt more alive. Rows of vines stretched endlessly into the horizon, their heavy clusters of grapes glistening with morning dew. This year's harvest promised to be their best yet, a testament to months of relentless effort and determination. She took a deep breath, the air carrying the faint sweetness of ripening fruit. The weight of the vineyard's revival had been heavy, but the rewards were beginning to bloom. Still, there was one last hurdle, solidifying the partnerships and plans that would secure its future for generations. As she headed downstairs, she found Henry already seated at the dining table, a cup of coffee in his hand and a stack of documents before him. "Good morning," he greeted, looking up with a smile. "Morning, Dad," Sophia replied, pouring herself a cup of coffee. She gestured toward the papers. "More investor updates?" Henry nodded, his expression serious. "We've got good news from the primary investors. They're interested in a long-term stake in the vineyard. But they want to see a comprehensive 5-year plan before committing fully." Sophia's heart raced. "That's a lot of pressure." "It is," Henry admitted. "But it's also a chance to take everything you've built and show them it's sustainable. This is your moment, Sophia." Sophia took the challenge seriously. She spent the next few days poring over financial reports, mapping out future goals, and consulting with Don Miguel and Carmen. Late one night, as she sat in the office with documents spread around her, Lucia appeared in the doorway, holding a plate of cookies and a cup of tea. "You're working too hard," Lucia said, setting the plate down beside her. Sophia smiled wearily. "I can't afford not to. This plan needs to be perfect." Lucia placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "It's already clear to everyone that your heart is in the right place. Trust yourself. The rest will follow." Her words lingered with Sophia as she continued working into the early hours. The day of the investor presentation arrived quickly. The vineyard's tasting room was transformed into a professional yet inviting space, showcasing their finest wines and photographs of the vineyard's history. The investors, 3 sharp-eyed business professionals, arrived mid-morning, their crisp suits a stark contrast to the rustic charm of the setting. Sophia greeted them warmly, hiding her nerves behind a confident smile. As they toured the vineyard, she spoke passionately about its history, its growth, and her vision for its future. "This isn't just a business," Sophia said as they stood by the vines. "It's a home, a place where people connect with the land and with each other. My mother believed in that, and so do I." The investors nodded, their interest evident. Back in the tasting room, Sophia presented her 5-year plan. Her voice was steady as she outlined strategies for expanding production, increasing community involvement, and exploring sustainable practices to set the vineyard apart in a competitive market. When she finished, there was a brief silence as the investors exchanged glances. Then one of them, a woman named Evelyn, leaned forward. "Sophia," Evelyn said, "your passion is clear and your plan is impressive. I think I speak for all of us when I say we'd like to move forward." Sophia exhaled, relief flooding through her. "Thank you. You won't regret it." The investors spent the rest of the day enjoying the vineyard's hospitality, but Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that something still needed to be done. The vineyard was secure financially, but her mother's dream wasn't just about business. It was about people. That evening, as the stars began to appear, Sophia gathered her team by the fire pit near the main house. Don Miguel, Carmen, Lucia, and Henry sat around her, their faces lit by the warm glow of the flames. "I wanted to thank all of you," Sophia began, her voice steady but emotional. "This vineyard wouldn't be what it is today without your dedication, your belief in me, and your belief in this land. But there's something more I want to do." The group exchanged curious glances. "My mother's dream wasn't just about growing grapes or making wine. It was about building a community. So I want to dedicate a part of this vineyard to her, a space where people can come together, celebrate, and feel the same connection she did." Carmen's eyes glistened with tears. She would have loved that. Don Miguel nodded. "It's a fitting tribute." Henry's voice was quiet but filled with emotion. "Your mother would be so proud of you, Sophia." The next few weeks were filled with preparations for the new space, a garden and event area near the old chapel, where her mother had often found solace. Workers planted wildflowers and built trellises draped with vines, creating a space that felt both sacred and welcoming. On the day of its unveiling, the entire community gathered. Local families, workers, and guests stood together as Sophia spoke. "This vineyard has always been more than just a piece of land," she said, her voice carrying over the crowd. "It's a place of love, resilience, and connection. My mother believed that, and today we honor her by opening this space to all of you." The crowd erupted into applause, and Sophia felt a wave of pride and peace wash over her. As the evening continued, with laughter and music filling the air, Sophia stood at the edge of the celebration, looking out over the vineyard. Henry joined her, holding 2 glasses of wine. "To your mother," he said, handing her a glass. "And to the future," Sophia replied, clinking her glass against his. For the first time, Sophia felt the weight of her journey lift. The vineyard was thriving, the community was strong, and her mother's dream had been realized. This was her legacy now, and she knew she had the strength to nurture it for years to come. The vineyard entered a new era as Sophia's vision began to fully materialize. The community garden and event space became a hub of activity, hosting weddings, seasonal festivals, and workshops that brought people from all walks of life together. Each day felt like a step closer to fulfilling her mother's dream, and yet Sophia knew the work was never truly done. One crisp autumn morning, as the leaves on the vines turned shades of gold and crimson, Don Miguel called Sophia to the southern orchard. "You'll want to see this," he said, leading her down the familiar path toward the clearing near the old chapel. Sophia followed, her heart racing slightly. Don Miguel's tone was calm, but carried an undercurrent of excitement. When they arrived, she saw workers gathered around an old, overgrown section of land, their tools set aside as they examined something uncovered in the soil. "What's going on?" Sophia asked, stepping closer. Don Miguel gestured to the workers. "We were clearing this area for the new vines when we found something unusual." Sophia knelt beside the workers and gasped. Unearthed from the soil was a large, rusted metal chest. The corners were dented, and the lock had long since corroded. "It must have been here for decades," Don Miguel said. "Maybe longer." Sophia's fingers brushed the surface of the chest. Her curiosity piqued. "Can we open it?" The workers pried the chest open carefully, and inside were layers of faded fabric wrapped around what appeared to be documents, small trinkets, and bottles of wine. The scent of aged paper and earth filled the air as Sophia carefully lifted out the contents. The documents were letters, ledgers, and journals, some written by her grandparents and others by her mother. The trinkets included a locket similar to the one Sophia had found in the chapel, and the wine bottles were marked with a label she didn't recognize. This is a piece of the vineyard's history," Sophia said, her voice trembling with awe. Back at the house, Sophia and Carmen carefully cleaned and examined the chest's contents. Among the documents was a letter addressed to Sophia's mother, written by her grandfather. "To my dearest Isabella," it began. "This vineyard is more than our livelihood, it is our legacy. If you ever find yourself lost, remember that the roots of this land run deep, and they will always guide you home. Pass this wisdom to your children, for they are the next stewards of our dream." Sophia felt a lump rise in her throat as she read the words aloud to Carmen. "He wanted her to pass this on to me," she said softly. "And now she has," Carmen replied, her eyes filled with emotion. The discovery of the chest breathed new life into Sophia's plans for the vineyard. The historical documents and vintage wine became a centerpiece for a new initiative, a heritage collection that would celebrate the vineyard's past while looking toward its future. Sophia worked tirelessly to restore the artifacts, enlisting local historians and artisans to help preserve them. The chest became the heart of a new exhibit in the tasting room, where visitors could learn about the vineyard's origins and the generations of care that had shaped it. As the exhibit came together, Sophia reflected on how far she had come. The vineyard was no longer just a place to prove herself or to honor her mother's memory. It had become her life's work, her passion, and her greatest accomplishment. On the day the Heritage Collection was unveiled, the vineyard hosted a grand celebration. Guests marveled at the restored artifacts, tasted the vintage wines, and listened to stories of the land's history. Sophia stood at the center of it all, her heart full as she watched her vision come to life. As the evening drew to a close, Sophia found herself once again at the chapel. She sat on the steps, the cool night air wrapping around her as she looked up at the stars. Henry approached, his footsteps quiet against the dirt path. He carried 2 glasses of wine, handing one to Sophia as he sat beside her. "You've built something incredible here," he said, his voice filled with pride. Sophia smiled, her gaze still on the sky. "We've built it. I couldn't have done this without you, or without everyone who believed in this place." Henry nodded, raising his glass. "To your mother, and to you." "To all of us," Sophia replied, clinking her glass against his. They sat in comfortable silence, the vineyard stretching out before them like a living testament to love, resilience, and hope. For Sophia, the journey had been long and filled with challenges, but it had led her exactly where she was meant to be. This land, this legacy, it was home. And it always would be. The days leading up to the final harvest were a flurry of activity. Every worker, every hand, was focused on ensuring that the vineyard's hard work would culminate in a season to remember. Sophia walked among the vines at dawn, feeling the cool earth beneath her boots and the crisp air that carried the faint sweetness of ripened grapes. She paused by one of the older vines, her hand brushing its gnarled stem. This section of the vineyard had always been her mother's favorite. Carmen once said it was because the vines here were the first to be planted by Sophia's grandparents. They were resilient, their roots deep and strong, a symbol of everything the vineyard stood for. "Morning, Miss Kensington." Sophia turned to see Don Miguel approaching, his clipboard tucked under one arm. His steady presence had become a cornerstone of her efforts to rebuild the vineyard. "Good morning," Sophia said with a smile. "How are we looking?" "Better than expected," Don Miguel replied. "The workers are ahead of schedule. If all goes well, the harvest will be done before the first frost." "That's good to hear," Sophia said, her gaze sweeping over the vineyard. "This harvest feels different." "It should," Don Miguel said, his voice thoughtful. "It's the first one that's truly yours." Sophia nodded, her heart swelling with pride and a touch of nervous anticipation. This wasn't just about picking grapes, it was about solidifying her place in the vineyard's legacy. As the morning unfolded, Sophia worked alongside the team, her movements now confident and practiced. The workers treated her as one of their own, and their camaraderie filled her with a sense of belonging she hadn't felt anywhere else. By midday, Henry arrived, his sleeves rolled up and a determined expression on his face. "You're joining us?" Sophia asked, raising an eyebrow. "I figured it's about time I got my hands dirty," Henry said with a smirk. Sophia chuckled. "Better late than never." The two of them worked side by side, their silence filled with an unspoken understanding. For years, Henry had been a distant figure in Sophia's life, but now, standing together in the vineyard, it felt like they were finally on the same page. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the vineyard, the final basket of grapes was loaded onto the truck. The workers cheered, their voices carrying across the fields. Sophia climbed onto the back of the truck, her face flushed from the day's labor but glowing with pride. "Everyone," she called out, her voice clear and steady, "this harvest isn't just about the grapes we've picked. It's about everything we've built together. Thank you for believing in this vineyard, in its legacy, and in each other. None of this would have been possible without you." The applause was deafening, and as Sophia looked out over the gathered crowd, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. That evening, the vineyard transformed into a scene of celebration. Tables were set under strings of twinkling lights, and the air was filled with music, laughter, and the scent of roasted vegetables and freshly baked bread. Families gathered, workers toasted their hard-earned success, and guests from the local community joined in the festivities. Sophia wandered through the crowd, sharing stories and smiles. She paused by the tasting room, where Henry was standing with a glass of wine in hand, his gaze fixed on the lively scene. "Not bad, huh?" Sophia said, joining him. "Not bad at all," Henry replied, his voice tinged with pride. "You've done something remarkable here, Sophia. Your mother would have been proud." Sophia smiled, her chest tightening with emotion. "She's the reason I could do this. And you're part of it too, Dad. I couldn't have done it without you." Henry's expression softened. "You're stronger than you know, Sophia, and I'm proud of the woman you've become." The two of them clinked glasses, their bond stronger than it had ever been. As the night wore on and the stars began to appear, Sophia stood on the edge of the vineyard, the rows of vines stretching out before her like a living testament to everything she had worked for. This was her home, her legacy, and she was ready for whatever the future held. The morning air was crisp as Sophia stood at the edge of the newly unveiled community garden, her gaze sweeping over the vibrant rows of wildflowers and trellises, heavy with climbing vines. This space, nestled near the old chapel, had become the heart of the vineyard, a place where her mother's dreams and her own had finally merged into something tangible. Today was the official dedication ceremony. Families, workers, and visitors from the community filled the garden, their voices carrying a mixture of excitement and warmth. Tables laden with freshly baked bread, local cheeses, and bottles of the vineyard's finest wine were arranged beneath strings of twinkling lights. Sophia moved through the crowd, her heart swelling with gratitude at every smile and word of encouragement. She spotted Carmen by one of the tables, helping a group of children weave grapevine wreaths. Nearby, Don Miguel was deep in conversation with an investor, his hand gesturing toward the horizon as he spoke passionately about the vineyard's future. At the front of the garden, Henry stood beside the small wooden podium, looking unusually at ease. When he caught Sophia's eye, he nodded toward the microphone. "It's time," he said simply. Sophia took a deep breath, smoothing her hands over her dress before stepping forward. The crowd quieted as she approached, their attention settling on her with a warmth that made her feel both vulnerable and deeply supported. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "This vineyard has always been more than just a place to grow grapes. It's a place of connection, between people, between the land, and between generations." She paused, her gaze drifting toward the chapel in the distance. "My mother believed in that connection. She saw this vineyard as a home, a legacy, and a sanctuary, and she passed that belief on to me, even when I didn't realize it at the time." The crowd listened intently as she continued. "Today, we honor her vision, and the vision of everyone who has worked to make this vineyard what it is. This garden isn't just a tribute to the past, it's a promise for the future." She gestured toward the small plaque at the entrance to the garden. It bore her mother's name, along with the words, "A place where love grows and roots run deep." The crowd erupted into applause, and Sophia stepped back, her chest tight with emotion. Henry joined her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Your mother would have been proud," he said softly. Sophia turned to him, her eyes glistening. "I think she would have been proud of us both." The rest of the evening unfolded in a blur of laughter, music, and celebration. The vineyard glowed under the soft light of lanterns, and the air was filled with the scent of wine and wildflowers. Later that night, after the last guest had left and the vineyard was quiet once more, Sophia found herself standing by the stone chapel. She held her mother's notebook in one hand and the locket in the other, the weight of both grounding her. The stars above were brilliant, their light casting a soft glow over the vines. Sophia opened the notebook to the final page, one she had read countless times, but never fully understood until now. "To my dearest Sophia, always remember that this vineyard, like life, is about more than the harvest. It's about the roots we plant, the care we give, and the love we share. These things will always endure. Sophia closed the notebook, her heart full. She turned toward the vines, the land she now called home, and let the stillness of the moment settle over her. This vineyard was more than her mother's dream. It was her own. And as the first rays of dawn began to touch the horizon, Sophia smiled, ready to embrace everything the future would bring.